Welcome, everybody, and good morning. We are live. Ashley, my lovely co-host, is here with me. How you doing, Ashley?
Good morning. I'm well. How are you?
Doing fine, thank you. So this that you see on the screen, this is our upcoming event. I didn't want to forget about it. I wanted to make sure we mention it. So this is our event in Orlando, mid-September, Empowered Investor Live. It is our first live conference post-COVID, and it should be a great event. It's good to get out of the house, folks, and maybe travel somewhere. And this event, if you want, hey, bring the whole family because it's Orlando. You've got Universal Studios, Disney World, Epcot Center, and lots more. So yeah, great opportunity for that. September 10th, 11th, and 12th in Orlando, Florida. So join us for Empowered Investor Live. And we want to see you there. And here is where you can get your tickets. empoweredinvestor.com. Just go to empoweredinvestor.com. We're going to have some great speakers lined up for this event. It's really going to be an awesome time. So we look forward to seeing as many of you as possible in Orlando mid-September. Orlando's a great airport, really easy, by the way, very easy to get direct flights, very convenient, very reasonably priced to fly in and out of Orlando. So definitely a good event. That's why we had it there. And by the way, we're having it at this beautiful, beautiful resort property that actually has its own Wikipedia page. It's a famous resort in Orlando, and it is gorgeous. I absolutely love this place. I've stayed there many times myself. Big fan of it. So yeah, join us in Orlando for Empowered Investor Live.
For your investors. So.
What's that, Ashley?
Only the best for your investors.
Only the best. That's right. It'll be a great event. So we look forward to seeing you there. So we've got some stuff to cover today, don't we?
Yes, actually, I'm still reeling from last week when my inflation joke went right over your head, literally and figuratively.
But it went over my head? Inflation? That's like my favorite topic. How could it go over my head?
All right, but I would like to start with a question that was asked last week, and we didn't quite get to it, but I think it is worthwhile to cover, from Eric Fisher. And it all started when we were talking about passing down your wealth and assets to your children and what to do with all the money you make from your real estate investing. And Eric Fisher asked, Jason, what are some of your ideas with the upcoming Biden tax initiatives when it comes to loss of step-up in basis and increased capital gains in order to avoid the decimation of generational wealth?
Well, that's a great question, Eric. A lot of people are worried about that, but we don't know that that's going to happen. So these are not foregone conclusions. There's obviously a process in this great country, that is sadly in decline, but still great. There's a process, and it's difficult for Biden, who is a puppet for who knows what, the New World Order, to get this through automatically. But when you refer to the step up in basis, what you're talking about there is under current law, and by the way, I need to make the disclaimer, I'm not an attorney, I'm not a tax advisor, so check with the appropriate professional always. But we discuss topics, ideas, personal experiences here, and I can certainly do that. Although I have not passed away yet, thankfully. So I can't tell you what would happen to my estate upon death. Not yet, but one day. So step up in basis, it's a great deal now, because if you own a bunch of real estate and you purchased it years ago at a much lower price, the basis for tax purposes steps up to current market value when it's inherited. And that is a fantastic deal, fantastic way to pass down generational wealth. It's great. And on the way to that event, you can do 1031 exchanges all your life and defer the tax. And then the way out of the tax is to just die, right? And so that's a great deal for your heirs.
Mhm.
But again, really think about how much you want your kids to inherit. Think about their ages, and if they are young or even not young but irresponsible, you really may not want to have them inherit all that money. You may want to put it in a trust with conditions that it is time released, like certain medication. It's timed release, right? And so they don't get it all at once to really mess up their lives. And you do things prudently, right? In estate planning. So stepped up in basis, that was one. Ashley, what was the other part of that question?
The other part of that question was when it comes to loss of step up in basis and increased capital gains in order to avoid the decimation of generational wealth.
Yeah. So capital gains tax, I think that one stands a decent chance of getting through, where we see a likely increase in capital gains tax. Right now, capital gains are taxed at a much lower rate than ordinary income. The people who get screwed in our tax system are workers that get a W-2 salary. 1099, you're better off if you're a contractor or a freelancer, because then you can deduct things against that income. And then the best treatment in our system currently is for investors. And, you could have all kinds of arguments that that's unfair. And I don't know, it's debatable. And I used to say, no, it's definitely not unfair, because the investors that are investing the money already paid income tax on that money before they invested it, right? But with the concentration of wealth getting to quite literally absurd and obscene levels, uh, I think there's some reason to maybe think differently about that. And again, I would favor no tax, no Federal Reserve, libertarian ideals here. But hey, we have the system we have, so I'm going to capitulate on a lot of things, given the system we're in and the world we're in, right? Nothing happens in a vacuum. So we probably will see an increase in capital gains tax. I think that's very likely. So the best asset for that currently is income property, because you can 1031 exchange it and never pay capital gains tax. However, Biden is attacking that too, as you probably know, where he wants to limit that to no more than $500,000 per year in deferral. But look, that's per year. So it depends on how big a fish you are, right? For most people in the middle class, you're going to be fine with that. You don't need to 1031 more than $500,000 per year, right? So you're going to be okay. It's not really going to hit you. If you're wealthier, then hey, you got problems, and there are all kinds of creative strategies that are coming out of this, that will come out of this. People always vote with their feet. Money always goes where it's treated best. And this is one of the reasons that Janet Yellen, our Treasury Secretary, former Federal Reserve Chair, is trying to institute a global minimum tax so that people can't vote with their feet. Now, they can currently vote with their feet within the country, from state to state. There's, like Florida, my new home state for the last 3 years or so, has fantastic tax opportunities. Texas is very good, although it has higher property tax, and the homestead exemption is not unlimited in Texas like it is in Florida. But there are always strategies. They just become more expensive, more creative, and more risky to get around things, to have a tax plan. But just, you have to learn more. You have to spend a lot more of your time defending yourself against your own government, which is stupid. We shouldn't have to do that. Our government should be on our side, but it's not. So what happens is, and I've had these conversations many times with our investors. We'll be out at a meal, or it'll be one of our conferences, and we'll be at lunch, and the whole discussion for 45 minutes sitting there at lunch, for example, is about avoiding taxes, which is completely legal, right? To try and avoid taxes and use the tax law in your favor, when the discussion really should be focused on how to create value in the economy, how to earn money, instead of how to get around the tax system. So a tax code as complex as ours and as punitive as ours causes people to reallocate their resources toward avoiding the tax rather than creating value in the economy. So, but that's a whole philosophical rabbit hole. But yeah, so hope I helped answer that. But
Yeah.
again, none of this has happened yet. So we don't know what will get through, what won't, how bad it'll be. But something's going to happen. We're going to see higher taxes one way or the other.
Mm-hmm. One of your viewers, A Costa Living, shared his experience here. He talked about 500K max appreciation for capital gains. I was looking at large complex, hope to increase.
Maybe large apartment complex.
Apartment complex, but for now, sticking with single family.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So is there a question in there?
Yes, and then he followed that up with, do you think they will get rid of stepped up basis and make you pay when property is sold, forcing them to hold, or just keep 1031ing? This would also protect family businesses if they don't sell.
That's really the same question as before. Stepped up basis is upon death, and it's the same thing. So look, we don't know yet, folks, but somehow or another, the Dems are going to tax us more. It's just, that's a foregone conclusion. Exactly how they'll do it, we will see.
Mm-hmm. Okay, another question from Everton Brian. Happy Sunday. What do you think will happen with interest rates on investment loans when the adverse refinance fee goes away in August? Going away.
Mm-hmm. Interest rates on investment loans. Oh, yeah. It's good that the fee is going away, but the investment loans under Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, those fantastic conventional loans, or what's also known as agency loans, they are under attack too. The powers that be, they don't want to see investors make as much money as they have. They want to cool the housing market on the investor side, to, in theory, preserve more opportunities for regular home buyers. And so they did a big attack on that a few months ago. You probably heard about it, where they said that each lender could only sell off a small percentage of their investor loans to Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, thereby limiting the amount of loans they could or would do under these great terms. So it's definitely under attack, and it's probably going to get worse. The heyday of investors having these fantastic, basically government-sponsored loans, right? This is welfare for investors, and hey, take it. It's fantastic, but it's definitely under attack. No question about it. Investors already pay a higher interest rate than typical owner-occupant home buyers do, and that's likely to get worse. So what should you do with this knowledge? Well, take advantage of it today, right? Stock up on as many of these fantastic mortgages as you can, because it's all just under attack, folks. They're trying to limit it and just reduce the opportunities. So take advantage of whatever you can. Now, this won't affect Invitation Homes with their tens of thousands of homes, right? Because they get their money from Wall Street. They get it differently, and they get it cheaper than we do. So again, everything we're seeing is a way to, in theory, help the lower middle class, or maybe the bottom part of the middle class. And that's what they're saying. And it might help them a little bit around the margins, but it really helps the ultra rich. It helps Wall Street. All of this stuff benefits the ultra rich. It all creates more concentration of wealth against the ultra rich, the billionaire class, the global elite, and Wall Street, which same thing, right? So yeah, it's not good. Ashley, do you want to go to some of your slides for a minute? Take a break.
Sure, absolutely. I'd love to. So if you can go to slide number 8. So we've been doing.
Let me get to your slides. I got a couple I want to share here.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, I'll just go to yours. I think this is 8, right?
The previous one right before that.
Okay, there we go. Okay, so is this officially your trivia question?
No, this is my sentiment survey because
Okay.
this week Michelle Fox from CNBC posted an article and it shared data about this regarding this question: will today's children be worse off financially as adults than their parents? So we would like to hear your opinion in the comments. We would like to know what you think, what is your experience, and what you are doing to potentially prepare for this.
Yeah. So if you are a millennial who is watching this or listening to it somewhere in the world, in 189 countries worldwide, that we have followers and listeners. By the way, I get the ratings charts every day for the Creating Wealth podcast, and you folks in Malawi, we are down in Malawi. We dropped 4 points in the rankings. I was really discouraged about that. Why did we lose some of our listeners in Malawi? I tell you, Ashley, you can't win them all.
No, you can't. I'm sure they will come back. I'm sure they just had something important happening this week.
But you millennials, you have either coined or reiterated the phrase "Hey Boomer," blaming the baby boomers, blaming your baby boomer parents for your financial plight. Are you worse off? Write down in the comments below. Yes, millennials are up to 40. I know they're not kids anymore, these millennials. In fact, Ashley and I were talking about this a few weeks ago, that there's a term for the older millennials. They call them geriatric millennials. I thought that was pretty funny. The oldest millennials are 40 or even 41 now, I think. You're not kids anymore. And parents, do you think your kids will be better or worse off than you? Right? What do you all think? And by the way, also comment and tell us where you're watching from or listening from. We'd love to. We always like to see your location. It's great to know that. And Rent is Due says, not my children.
Very good. Very confident response. I like that.
Oh, that's
good. That's important. Absolutely.
And J6 says Malawi will return. My friends are hiking Kilimanjaro. Okay, awesome. Yeah, I have several friends who've done that one. Okay, so that is the question. We probably should wait and let people comment and answer, right, Ashley?
Yeah.
Okay.
We'll wait a little bit. Yes.
Okay, so let me go to a few of my slides here. So this one, I just saw this and it really was pretty discouraging. So Social Security has adjustments based on cost of living adjustment, or a COLA, COLA adjustment. That probably should be capitalized. It's an acronym, cost of living adjustment. And here is what it has looked like historically, right? And the theory here is that your Social Security income will keep pace with inflation. Now, look, this is not a government perk. This is, you paid for this. Well, you pay for everything, right? You pay in terms of taxation or inflation. That's the way we pay for everything the government does. There's no other way to pay for it. The government creates zero actual value in the economy. It simply receives money and then doles it out. And in between there, it creates a lot of new currency. I shouldn't say money, I should say currency, the proper word. And it adjusts Social Security benefits for inflation. But the inflation index is so manipulated to be much lower than it really is. We can argue about how much lower, and I'm going to share some stats on that in just a moment. But can you imagine 0% increase in 2015? Was inflation 0% 6 years ago? I don't think so. What was it? Was it 0% in 2011? Of course not, right? 1.6% last year. Well, you could argue that there was some deflation last year during the pandemic. Back when inflation was really high at the end of the Carter disaster, the Jimmy Carter disaster, and really the 70s were kind of a disaster in general, 14.3% increase. But the real inflation rates are manipulated down, according to the Consumer Price Index, the CPI, in three major ways. hedonic adjustments, weighting, and substitution. These are the three ways they understate inflation. They have a huge incentive to understate inflation. So they do. And I would like to propose that instead of listening to the government and their CPI, their consumer price index, which is hugely misleading, you need to listen to the Chapwood Index. And this is the Chapwood Index. Now, what they do is they take 500 items that we all spend money on, and they simply look at the price changes in those items, and then they average them. It's really simple. It's not manipulated like the CPI is. And they do that for a whole bunch of major cities. And as they do that, they calculate the inflation rate in these cities, right? So in New York City, now it's probably declined a bit because New York City's had its problems, obviously, and continues to have its problems. The inflation rate for the first half of 19, 12.1%, a 5-year average of 11.4. Let's just go to the 5-year averages, okay? Because that's, it evens it out a little bit. But Los Angeles, where I grew up, my hometown, 11.7%, Chicago, 10.9%, Houston, 8.9%, and Houston is a linear market. All right, so linear, cyclical, hybrid markets, as I teach the 3 types of markets. Philadelphia, 10.9%, Phoenix, 8%, San Antonio, 9%, San Diego, 12%, Dallas, 8.9%, and then keep going here. Ashley, if you want to pick a few of these, feel free.
San Jose, the highest, 13%. So what about Columbus, Ohio, 9.3%?
So the difference there that's interesting, San Jose, you've got a cyclical market, Silicon Valley, obviously, crazy real estate prices there, crazy prices of everything. But Columbus, Ohio, a totally linear market. I mean, Columbus, a boring linear market that, many of our investors have purchased properties in.
Indianapolis, 9.9%.
Linear, right? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Amazing. Look at Detroit, even crappy Detroit. I mean, Ashley, what's the number for Detroit?
11.3%.
Yeah, inflation is dramatically higher than they're telling us. And, I don't have the average of the CPI during that time, during that 5-year period, but I would guess that the average CPI for the 5-year period, according to the government understating inflation, was probably, give or take, 2.5%. You are being completely robbed and ripped off here because they are just lying to us about the real rate of inflation. And they have a huge incentive to do so because they don't need to increase the Social Security entitlements. They don't need to increase the other entitlements. And the government being over 20% of the economy, the government pay for all those government workers we shouldn't have that should be working in the private sector, right? The government, I mean, this is a good way to look at it. Take a 10-story government building. There are way too many of them in this country, okay? Just assume it's a 10-story building. The first 2 to 3 floors of that building, that's the government we probably all support and like and agree with. The next 8 to 10 stories are unnecessary. It's a bunch of administrative bureaucracy. Okay. The government we can see, most people, well, except the nut jobs supporting, the leftist wackos and the BLM people that want chaos, right? I'm not saying all BLM people do, but a lot of them do. Defund the police, right? That's nuts, by the way, and it's already backfired. You just gotta love how it's massively backfired, but it's hurt a lot of people, right? The government we can see most of us support, right? It's police, fire protection, logical, rational amount of government. 2 to 3 stories in that 10-story building, okay? 20 to 30%. Let's get rid of the extra 70 to 80% of bureaucratic nonsense, right? And then the government wages, maybe they wouldn't be so inclined to manipulate the CPI down because they wouldn't be paying so much in government wages. All those people would get a real job in the private sector.
Can you go back to the numbers for, okay, Charlotte? Yes,
You want this one? Yeah, Charlotte.
James is asking for Charlotte, 8.6%.
5-year average, 8.6%
5-year average.
inflation in Charlotte. Yeah. And, of course, it depends who you are in Charlotte or any of these cities, right? If you're a wealthy person in Charlotte, your inflation rate is going to be different because your spending patterns will likely be different. If you are a poor person in Charlotte, your spending pattern will be different because you're going to be spending more on necessities, food, clothing, shelter, right? Different. So everybody has a personal inflation rate. And even if you're in the same exact economic class, you're going to spend money differently also, right? So we all have our own personal inflation rate, but it is largely dictated geographically. And that is another thing I love about the Chapwood Index. So check it out. Here's a video on it. I won't show you, but let me just look at the text on the screen. The Chapwood Index reflects the true cost of living increase in America. Updated and released twice a year, it reports the unadjusted key word there, actual cost and price fluctuation of the top 500 items on which Americans spend their after-tax dollars in the 50 largest cities in the nation. Now, this is not related to the Chapwood Index, but I want to point out something that I alluded to earlier about how employees, if you have a W-2 salaried position, you are paying tax at the absolute highest rate. See how he says 500 items on which Americans spend their after-tax dollars. Key phrase. See, if you are a real estate investor, or you are self-employed, or even if you're not really self-employed, but you're just a contractor, right? You're like a real estate agent or someone who's not on a salary. You're a freelance graphic designer, whatever, web developer, doesn't, anything, where you get a 1099 from maybe a bunch of different clients, right? You get to deduct a lot of these things before taxes. So that's the key. As a real estate investor, there are some expenses that you can throw into your business of real estate investing. So no matter what you do, if you have that corporate job and you get that W-2 income, that nice, in theory, secure salary, right? Which is not secure at all, right? But if you get it, have a side hustle so that you can at least use that side hustle to take some deductions on these expenses. Okay. Ashley, do we have some answers to this yet?
Yes, we had a couple, and I think most of your viewers are pretty confident actually that their children will be better off. So that's nice. I like that. So if you go to the next slide, you can see what the national American sentiment was as compared to some other countries. So we have the US at 68%.
Worse off.
Yeah. So there's a very pessimistic view right now in the United States that the future looks grim for the next generations. And actually, going through the list, most of these countries are pretty pessimistic. There's only a few that stand out, where the general population thinks that the children are going to be better off in the future, and that is Sweden
and Singapore.
Singapore, yeah.
Yeah, well, Singapore, okay, we won't talk about that right now. We talked about it last week.
Yeah, but it is a little depressing. The United States came in at number 6, ranked number 6 in worse off.
Yeah.
In front of them was Canada, Japan, France, Italy, Spain, and Belgium.
So let's go into that for a moment. That's really interesting. I mean, Ashley, you're one of the few people that has been to more countries than I have. I'm at 87, and you are at 110. So Ashley is the world traveler for sure. But I got my respectable 87 countries. Okay.
Very respectable. Yeah.
So, this refers to Generation Z and Generation Y, right? So millennials and Gen Zers, okay? And in this I agree with this. I think that millennials will be worse off and Gen Zers will be worse off than their parents. Now, maybe, and this is on the whole, now maybe the reason my listeners said that is because my listeners are here. They're studying, they're making plans, they're taking action, they're buying properties. So, yes, in the survey of the people we're talking to, their kids are going to be better off, right? Because they're making that happen. They're taking action to do something about it. But generally speaking, I think the survey is pretty accurate.
Mm-hmm.
Now let's look here and let's talk about France and Spain and Italy, for example, and Belgium even, right? Those are all looking pretty bleak. They don't have Greece in here. Greece would be, it's too small, I guess. So Greece is way worse off. So here, look at you've got these European countries. I mean, I love to visit them. Hey, I was born in one of them. I was born in Europe, right? But they are a disaster of socialism, political correctness, bureaucracy, unions. I mean, they're just La Dolce Vita. It's the people just don't want to work. Oh no, Greece is on here. I didn't see it. I'm surprised that Greece, well, they're living in fantasy land. Mm-hmm. Because the likelihood is they're going to be worse than France, I would say. But that's the attitude of the people. It's not a empirical survey. It's anecdotal. So yeah, but these countries they're just a mess. They really are. Singapore, fantastic country. A well managed but largely centrally planned country, but well managed, ambitious, smart population. So that's interesting. Japan, I'd point them out. Japan has really just got a huge demographic problem. Very smart, very educated people, very hardworking, possibly the hardest working people in the world are in Japan. Workaholism is a real problem there. But again, a demographic time bomb. If you don't have kids, you can't have a functioning society. You can't have a country. Japan will literally cease to exist in several decades. Russia will cease to exist. Western Europe will cease to exist in its current form. I mean, of course, it's got an immigration disaster, but it won't be Western Europe. It isn't Western Europe anymore. Europe is nothing like the old Europe. And if you want to see how much things have changed, folks, you know what I always say: watch old movies, watch old TV shows, listen to old music, read old books. You must do that. You must do that to just understand how radically the world has changed and how 1990 was the peak of civilization. Ashley, what do you think about that? Have we had that discussion?
We did. We talked about it last week, actually.
Yeah. What did you say? I don't remember.
But it was in terms of the cultural height of civilization.
Yeah, but culture determines so much.
Yes, it does. Yeah, it does. Yeah. Now we had a very interesting comment from P. James. He says, "I believe my children will be so much worse off. Jobs will be so hard to get. Demographic hiring." So he made an interesting point about the job, the way the job market is going to evolve and change in the next few decades.
Yeah. Now, demographic hiring, I wonder what you mean by that. Is that maybe the meaning there is affirmative action, mm-hmm. and the disaster known as political correctness, or maybe I mean, you didn't mention automation, which I think is going to be just a huge factor. And when it comes to automation, they always say the famous last words: "This time it's different." But I think this time it really might be different. The automation and robotics this time around are so radically different than they've ever been before that, we'll see. I don't know. It's really, the next 10 years are going to be pretty fascinating. And by the way, how many of you please make a comment on this. How many of you have either read or heard of the book, The Fourth Turning, by Neil Howe, and I don't remember the co-author's name offhand, something Strauss. How many of you have read or heard of The Fourth Turning? Because The Fourth Turning talks about how we are moving right into that period now, and it's about an 80 to 90-year span that encapsulates 4 generations. And there's always a giant shift, and we're moving right into that shift. And the fourth turning predicts a massive wave of unemployment and some really challenging times, especially for younger people coming into the mid 2020s and the 2030s. So we'll see. I mean, there are all these cross currents, right? There are many reasons to believe it is an amazing time to be alive, and I agree with him. In some ways, the world is absolutely amazing and inspiring, but in some ways, there are some really dark clouds on the horizon too. It's this is why crystal balls don't work, right?
If you go to the following slide, there's some interesting information. There's a breakdown according to political alliance, which I found quite interesting. But yeah, your listeners, they have the book, they've read it, they agree. We are at 3.21 turning now.
3.21.
Yeah.
Okay. So I guess that means we are so 3.21. I guess we got like 0.8 left before the total fourth turning, or is that what that means?
Yeah, that's what he means. I think Jason Kincaid. Yeah.
Hi, Jason.
All right.
Ella, okay, these European countries are USA. Well, the US has got its share of problems too. So basically what this was saying, Ashley, is that people are becoming more pessimistic. So if you look at Italy, where you've lived for many years, and by the way, Ashley is fluent in Italian, so feel free to make a comment in Italian, and she can read it. Okay. But yeah, so the sentiment is getting worse and worse. Well, no, it got a little better here though. Yeah, interesting.
Yeah, a cost of living says automation, kiosks, and apps will put a lot of starter service people out of work. Look at a lot of the restaurants. I've noticed that too. There's a lot more.
Oh yeah.
You go in and you order from a screen.
Yep.
I've seen that increasingly more and more abroad, but certainly in the United States as well. It's coming. It's definitely coming.
Yeah,
I mean, it's not fast food or things like that. Nothing wrong with that, but yeah, upscale restaurants even.
I mean, McDonald's is paying signing bonuses to get minimum wage. Well, they're not minimum wage anymore. I mean, people are making $17 an hour now, flipping burgers. They're getting a $500 bonus because the government is causing inflation in a whole different way than anybody would have thought. They're paying people not to work, thereby forcing employers in the free market to compete with the government to pay them more than they get sitting at home. It is so messed up. I can't even believe it. Yeah. Wow. It's just what a mess of a system. It really is. Okay. Now I went to the next slide, but I don't think I displayed it on the screen, did I, Ashley?
No, I didn't see it. No. Go to the following one, actually.
Here's the one she was talking about, and you see how the sentiment is changing over the years. But yeah, interesting.
And then the following slide as well. So we've got Americans across ideological groups are pessimistic for children's future. And so this was between 2020 and 2021. And you can see in 2020, conservatives thought that their children had a great future. 63% had an optimistic view. And then there was an election, and now in 2021, it's 23%.
Right, there was an election, but there wasn't a elected president. That was that's interesting. Okay, so the moderates or the liberal Republicans, the rhinos, the Republicans in name only. Okay, so they are feeling a little better, right? And but then they got worse too. Okay, so what about our low information liberal friends? Conservative or moderate Democrat. Okay, here they felt better because they got their puppet in office, right? Interesting. Okay, but overall they don't feel as good as the Republicans did. Yeah.
in 2020. Yeah.
That's interesting. What's an interesting survey that was out a few years ago, and there have been a few surveys on this that I've read about, is how Republicans are happier than Democrats as people. And without being actually political about that, I'd like to talk about that for a moment because I think it's really interesting. And don't get offended, if you're on a different side of the political aisle about this, okay? And this is really not partisan. I just want to really have a real discussion about it. And please comment below. I'd love to hear what you think on this. So, the general idea of being a conservative or a Republican is, look, smaller government, be more self-reliant, less dependent on government. The general idea of being liberal or left or Democrat is that government should provide more for people, and the government should do more, and the government should be larger, and the private sector should in turn shrink, right? And we should have all sorts of security nets, safety nets from the government. It's really Lyndon John's great LBJ's Lyndon Baines Johnson's Great Society of the late 60s, which was an absolute frickin' disaster, and we're still paying for it. And by the way, there's interesting thoughts about that too, if you want to go down the rabbit hole. Because in 1971, we had to go off the gold standard right after the LBJ nightmare. Okay. So, but think about it. Look, when you do for yourself, when you do a hard day's work, you just have a sense of pride in that. Look, you earned it, right? It's like the opposite of what Obama said years ago. Remember that, this just became a fodder in the all the memes, right? Obama said, "You didn't build that." Right? Remember that one, folks? You didn't build that, right? When you built a company, or Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak created Apple, you didn't build that. The government built it, right? So it's you just, when someone gives you something, there's no pride in it, right? There's no pride in getting free money from the government. There's no sense of accomplishment in that. It's like taking drugs, right? Think about what really happens when someone is a substance abuser, whether it be prescription drugs, which are some of the worst abused substances of all, or illegal drugs. You get a rewarding feeling without work. That's essentially what happens when you use a substance, right? And, I'm not totally against all of this, by the way. I'm just saying, like anything, it should be in moderation and so forth. But, you drink alcohol, you get a rewarding feeling. All you had to do is pick up a glass and swallow the alcohol, right? You didn't have to do anything for it, right? So that's basically what welfare and government entitlements are. You get a rewarding feeling without doing anything. You get the money without doing anything. There's just no pride in that. And, it's okay once in a while, right? So to have a drink after a tough day, a day where you worked hard, right? It's Miller time, right? Great ad campaign. But you earned it. That's the idea of Miller time, right? That commercial. Not that you sat around all day just, drinking beer, right? There's no reward in that. There's no earning it. And so I think, in part, that's certainly why people on the right side of the political aisle end up happier. They don't have such a chip on their shoulder of, the world owes me a living. I didn't get enough, just go out and frickin' earn it. I mean, it's, of course, people on the right side of the political aisle are happier than people on the left side of the political aisle. The people on the left side of the political aisle are just bitter. They're angry. They think that, the government owes them something. The world owes them something. Whereas, generally speaking, not always, on the right side of the aisle, it's like, I'm just going to go out and work harder. I'm going to build something, right? Thoughts?
Someone asked me the other day, what's the difference between UBI and welfare?
Well, maybe not a lot. That's a great question, Ashley. Everything I said notwithstanding.
Yeah.
I have come around to the idea that we're probably going to have UBI, universal basic income. And a lot of my very libertarian friends believe that too. Um, you know, I think it's just going to be a practical consideration as the automation and the robotics really, really start to take over so many jobs. Number one, but there is an interesting case for it, and here's the case: if you have your basics covered, and you're not going to starve or be out on the streets and be homeless, it gives a person the latitude to maybe take more risk and create something, right? A lot of kids, we've all heard the stories of a lot of kids uh, working at home, living at home, will go and create a new tech thing or some new company, right? While they're in high school or college, but living at home because they've got the basics covered. They can afford to take greater risk. Now, will most people do that? Probably not. Most people just become sloths, right? But some people will do that. So there is kind of a case for it, but just as a practical consideration, so people aren't rioting in the streets with pitchforks. Maybe we just have to have it because that's what welfare is basically. Welfare is nothing more than essentially a bribe to get people to not riot in the streets, to not rise up. And welfare and UBI, yeah, they're not exactly the same, but to some extent, there's similarities. What do you think, Ashley?
Yeah, it's with the way the world is going, if there aren't going to be possibilities for jobs, then yeah, someone has to cover the basics, unfortunately, because where else what are people going to do? And I think, but it should not be a crutch. It should be something that is used carefully because you don't want to instill that idea of entitlement in people. I think that can be a bit dangerous. I do think good values about earning your money and earning and doing hard work are essential to society. And if people are just going to get things for free, on one hand, yes, it could incentivize them to follow a dream or to take a risk that they couldn't otherwise take. On the other hand, it might incentivize the other extreme, which would just be to not do anything, to just be content with that and not pursue anything else. And that's dangerous. I think that's dangerous.
Yeah, and it will be uneven, just like you said, right? It'll affect people differently, just like just like substances affect people differently. Some people can handle it; they can go out and have a few drinks, and it doesn't become their life. But some people it becomes their life, sadly, right? And so it just affects people differently.
Yeah.
Some people it'll be a hand up, some people it'll be a handout that'll cripple them. But
Yes.
Eccentric, I'd like to know why you said this. UBI is going to drive the wealth gap even larger than it is right now. Why would that be? I'm struggling with that. Now, here's another comment from you. Rothschild, meaning this is the Rothschild family, that's the banking family, obviously, stated that UBI to control the population almost 100 years ago. Well, yeah, it does have a way of controlling the population, especially when it's in the form of maybe a central bank digital currency, right? A Fed coin, where they can control whether you spend it, where you spend it, turn it off if they don't like your social score. Really scary stuff there. Yeah, definitely. But why the wealth gap, though, Eccentric? Tell us that specifically. What do you mean? Why will it create a bigger wealth gap? Okay. Ashley, if you want me to click on any of these questions, just let me know.
Yeah, yes. D. Olson says, I don't see UBI working. If everyone gets 10, 10 becomes the baseline after a short period.
Yeah. So what does 10 mean? So you get $1,000 a month, say, in UBI, and then that becomes the baseline. Yeah, it could cause some inflation too. certainly. And we definitely can't afford it. I mean, we know the government can't afford it, but they'll just create more fake currency out of thin air, and then more inflation as a byproduct. Which, by the way, folks, we didn't lead into anything here, but that's why income property is the best asset class ever. Go to jasonhartman.com and check out our properties on the properties page. You take advantage of this inflation. It benefits you through my technique of inflation-induced debt destruction, the most powerful way to create wealth, income property, and my technique of inflation-induced debt destruction. Very, very important. Okay, here's Julian. What's this say?
Wealth gap will be created because companies will raise prices to suck all the extra money in the economy.
Yeah. So basically, they'll just raise the prices by the amount of the UBI. Yes, that's certainly possible. But overall, over the course of 10 years of UBI, the system will start to equalize, right? Initially, you're definitely right. That will happen. No question about it. Just like it's happening now, right? We're seeing this situation with all these handouts and the increased savings rates and the supply chain disruptions. We're seeing, a massive amount of inflation right now. Yeah. So raise price, no question about it. But that will settle in. It'll become the new normal over time. Okay. So here, eccentric. Ashley, you want to read the questions?
Sure. UBI equals no incentive to work. No incentive to work equals harder for small businesses to survive. Trying to climb the financial ladder will become more and more difficult to achieve.
Possibly. No incentive to work. But remember, if the UBI isn't enough to, it has to be lower than wages, right? That's the problem we're having now with these enhanced unemployment benefits. And it's amazed me how, and this is not new, this has been happening for quite a while. It's amazed me how so many young people are disabled. I'm saying fake disabilities to get, disability benefits from the government. How is it that we have like millions of disabled young people? I mean, that we never had before, right? And this is over the last 10 plus years, right? They're just getting government benefits. They're not really disabled. Okay. This is just a way to scam the system. It's absolutely unbelievable. Same happened with the terrible program called Aid to Families with Dependent Children. They forced parents to break up the family, to not have a father around, and incentivized the welfare children, right? Generations of it now. It's an absolute disaster. Look, if you want to lay all of the problems we have in our country on a few people, and these are really become worldwide problems, because when you have the largest economy in the world, it just dictates a lot of what happens around the world. Lay them on Lyndon Johnson, an absolute disaster of a president. The Great Society and LBJ, frickin' disaster. And then Nixon, although his was really more of a reaction to it, taking us off the gold standard in 1971, and then price controls. And I mean, Nixon did a lot of stupid things, okay? But his stuff was more of a reaction to what happened before him, all right? And I don't know. Study the 70s. It's a really interesting economic time. And then go up to Carter and the Community Reinvestment Act that created the housing crisis into the 2000s. I mean, that was the genesis of it, the seed for it a long time ago. And then Clinton made it worse. And Clinton sold the American worker out with his trade agreements. I mean, just completely decimated the American worker under Bill Clinton, who was supposed to be the man of the people for the worker, right? And, supporting unions and all this stuff, right? Complete opposite happened. Ross Perot, if you remember Ross Perot with his flip charts when he was running for president, he coined that phrase, that giant sucking sound. And that's exactly what happened when Clinton just sold American jobs out. with his trade agreements. It was an absolute disaster for American workers. I'm not saying, I picked on some Democrats there, but I'm not saying, I picked on Nixon. He was a Republican. I'm not saying Republicans didn't do bad things too. Of course they did. They all suck. Okay. That's why they should have less power, then they'll suck less. But really, you can lay a lot of our problems on those presidents. They were huge. They had huge impacts, devastating impacts on America. They really did. Ashley, which questions?
Hartman for president. Who of our viewers?
Yeah, I wasn't born in the U.S.
Go for Hartman for president.
Obama, I guess, right?
We've got some great questions. I want to go back to one, to a real estate question from Sean Collins. I see you. I'm not ignoring you. So Sean Collins wrote back at 11:26 a.m. Selling my house will get $100K in net. Should I buy income property in Jacksonville, Florida with cash, or put it towards my new home mortgage and then do HELOC and then buy, refi, rehab, refinance properties in Jacksonville?
We have so many questions here. It's hard to
I know.
find. Okay, there's one question.
Yeah, it was right after that or right before that. Yeah, he asked it a couple times, so I don't want him to think I'm ignoring him.
Yeah, okay. So the question is, give me that question again. I know it was buying Jacksonville with cash. And Sean, you know what I'm going to say to buying in cash? I'm going to say, don't do that. Okay. But what was the rest of it, Ashley? Just help me.
Should I buy income property in Jacksonville, Florida with cash, or put it towards my new home mortgage and then do HELOC and buy, rehab, rent, refi, repeat?
I definitely do not want you to buy your property with cash, Sean. I want you to use these incredibly low, artificially low, historically low mortgage rates. Remember that mortgage is a giant asset right now. It is a huge asset. So take advantage of the asset called the mortgage. You could argue that the mortgage is more valuable than the actual property you get, but you can't get the mortgage without the property. And the property creates a self-liquidating debt mortgage. You're literally getting paid to borrow money. Go to jasonhartman.com. Look, use the search bar there and type in inflation-induced debt destruction. Listen to my podcast episodes about that. Go on my YouTube channel and look for inflation-induced debt destruction. And it is the best way to create wealth with your income properties. So finance it. Use leverage. Use other people's money. Very powerful tool. And when it comes to your own house, if you have this cash and you're thinking, well, do I use the cash for my own house or for a rental? The question is, or the answer is, neither one. Use as little cash as you can and buy 2 more rental properties instead of 1. Okay, and leverage them. Use these cheap mortgages. Think about this. If the inflation rate, well, let's just go with the official numbers, which that are understated, manipulated, fake news, whatever. Okay, if the inflation rate is 4% and you can borrow at 3%, right there, you're borrowing at 1% lower than the inflation rate. So the dollar is depreciating at a rate of 4%, according to that example, and you're borrowing at 3%. So you're getting paid 1% to borrow right there, negative interest rates. But wait, there's more. It gets much better than that. Your mortgage interest is deductible. And if your tax bracket, I don't know what state you live in or how much money you make or anything, but let's just go with a 50% tax bracket if you live in a crappy state like my home state, or old home state, the Socialist Republic of California, or New York or Massachusetts or whatever. If you live in one of these crappy states that tax people to death, Massachusetts, then your combined state and federal tax rate might be around 50%. I'll just use that as an example number. So if you pay 3% interest and half of it is deductible, then that's 1.5%. So you're really only paying 1.5. Now, if you subtract 4% inflation from 1.5, you're now negative 2.5. You're getting paid 2.5% to borrow now, not 1%. Is my math right? Yeah, it is, right? Okay. So 2.5% payment to borrow money. But wait, there's more. You're going to rent the property out. You're not going to pay for that mortgage. The tenant is going to pay for the mortgage. This is what we call self-liquidating debt. The debt liquidates with someone else. The mortgage is self-liquidating. You're not going to pay the mortgage payment. The tenant's going to pay the mortgage payment. So what is your interest rate then? How much are you getting paid to borrow then? Well, the answer is it's almost infinite. But wait, there's more. You're going to, well, not you, but your tenant is going to repay that debt, that mortgage debt, in ever depreciating dollars, meaning the value of that debt in terms of a monthly payment is declining because, say, the payment on the house is $1,000, but the inflation rate is 5% per year, just for round numbers. Actually, I won't do it that way. I'll say the inflation rate over 5 years is 20% combined over 5 years, right? So it's like 4% a year, but it really has a compounding effect. And, we don't have a calculator handy, so we're not going to do all that. But let's just say 20% inflation happens over 5 years. And according to the Chapwood Index, that would happen over less than 2 years, right? If you look at more realistic measures of inflation. But let's just say 20% over 5 years. So now that $1,000 payment, you're still writing a check for $1,000, or your online bill pay is still paying $1,000, but the value of it has diminished by 20%. So the real value of those dollars is only $800 because you got a 20% discount from inflation. And also, the balance of the mortgage, for round numbers, let's just say that was $100,000. Now the payment would be lower, but it's just an example. $100,000 mortgage balance, if you paid no principal in 5 years, would now only be equivalent in real dollars to an $80,000 mortgage balance. But wait, there's more. One more thing. There's more, but I'm just going to give you one more and then we'll go on. What if the property doesn't break even? What if it's not just a straight payment of the rent paying your mortgage and other expenses? What if you have positive cash flow? Then your return is even more incredible. Not only did you get all those things I just mentioned, but you got a tip every month called positive cash flow. Say it was $200 a month positive cash flow, which is very realistic. You can find properties at jasonhartman.com right now on the properties page that will offer you that. Contact one of our investment counselors, or better yet, I'm scrolling across the bottom here, a free mini book, a little mini book, well, not that one, this one, at pandemicinvesting.com that you can get. And one of our investment counselors will reach out to you and help you do this. So it's truly an incredible asset class, income property, because it is a multi-dimensional asset class. It is the most debt-favored asset class in America. It's the most tax-favored asset class in America. It's the most historically proven asset class in the entire world. It's truly an incredible asset class. And it has created more wealth for more people than any other asset class in the entire world. How many people do you know who got rich with income property? We all know several of them. Maybe we know many, many, many of them. I certainly do, because they're my clients. Okay. And how many people do you know that did that in the stock market? I ask this question at my conferences, and like one hand maybe goes up occasionally, but it's always some story about someone who got lucky trading options, or someone who had their own business and took it public. Well, that's not stock market investing. That's owning a business. That's a different topic, right? So yeah, it's an incredible asset class.
Mm-hmm. So Jay Kim asked, hey, Jason, I graduated college recently and have bought a townhome near Atlanta as a primary residence. I've been saving to buy another property, but don't think I can get another loan. Any advice?
Well, why do you think you can't get another loan? I mean, you can have up to 10 investment property loans, although they're tightening the belt on that. They're making the restrictions harder and harder. But why can't you get another loan? That's the first thing. You want to make sure that's actually true. And if it's because of a credit problem, reach out to our investment counselors. They can refer you to people who can help you fix that. I take it that it's not, because you said you just bought that townhome, so probably it's not. Is it you don't have enough income? Well, work on that. Get a side hustle. Do whatever you can. I don't know why you're saying you can't qualify for that other loan, but work on that. Get a plan going. Get with one of our investment counselors. They can help you devise that plan so you can get that second loan and start building an income property portfolio of at least 10 properties.
And what would you say to your viewers? A lot of them are commenting on it's legal to not pay rent, or what if the tenant stops paying rent with this current situation? So what kind of advice would you offer them?
So when those rent moratoriums hit the news just over a year ago, and the foreclosure moratoriums also hit the news right around the same time, we were actually very worried about that. It turned out to be pretty much a non-issue, where I heard maybe one or two stories of our thousands of clients who said someone was using the eviction moratorium as a way to work the system and not pay rent. Now, our clients are pretty much investing in single family homes in good quality areas, good quality neighborhoods. However, there are other investors who do other things, that invest in apartment complexes, or crappy houses in crappy areas that are cheap houses, that have lower quality tenants than our clients. And they did experience problems. A lot of the institutional apartment complexes where there's 100 units, 300 units in an apartment complex, they had a lot of people not pay rent. That's a different type of tenant in an apartment than in a single family home. Single family homes, you pretty much have tenants who are much less transient than apartment dwellers. They're a higher quality tenant on the whole. And this was just a non-issue. Listen, we were worried that it would be a real issue, but it just wasn't an issue. And it's still not. And these moratoriums are going away now. So not an issue. Knock on wood. Okay.
Yeah.
Maybe we just got lucky. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. All right. I like this next one from Sammy8446. Hey, Jason, I'm 20 years old. I'm debating whether to purchase a property to house hack or buy a rental property and continue to live with my parents.
Well, the best thing, Sammy, first of all, I bought my first rental property when I was 20, and I lived at home while I was a landlord owning an investment property. So I lived with mom, but I owned a rental property. So that was pretty cool, huh? Most people just want to get out and get their own place. I would say the straight rental property, I don't know where the rental property is, how much it costs, or any particulars here, obviously. But conceptually speaking, the rental property is going to be the better deal, because living in the house yourself, you're going to be paying money out to live there, right? You're going to have to pay the mortgage and you're not getting income from it. So that can only be considered a liability or an expense. Look, we have to, eventually you'll move out of your parents' house. But right now you can get away with living there until you're about 35 years old. Nowadays, that's how long people live at home, right? I'd say live with your parents a little longer if you can stand it, and if they can stand it, and do the rental property. But the second best thing is house hacking. That's not that bad a deal, because the reason house hacking isn't so bad is because you can get an owner-occupied loan, live there for a while, turn it into a rental, right? And that can be pretty good. Yeah,
you have a viewer from Pakistan right now, Nasir.
All right. Hey, Pakistan is in the house. How's it going?
Hello, Nasir. I'm from Pakistan. Nonetheless, your advice and 10 commandments doesn't only apply in the USA, but equally in Pakistani market as well. Debt as leverage is not very common, but banks are becoming flexible.
Well, that's interesting. I'd be curious to know, because the Muslim population there is really against borrowing, right, in the traditional sense. So they have these ways in Islamic banking to get around that system. I'd love to know more about that, Nasir. That's really interesting. But yeah, look at around the world, no matter where you are, Pakistan or anything outside of the U.S., you just don't have the fantastic environment we have with these incredible government-backed loans. I mean, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac are basically welfare for real estate investors, and take advantage of it, folks. You've paid taxes into the system. Use it. I'm talking to the Americans now, but yeah, I'm glad it applies in Pakistan and around the world too. That's awesome. And we have many listeners to the Creating Wealth Show who are in Pakistan, other Middle Eastern countries. We have listeners in 189 countries. So that's great. And if you want to make another comment about the Islamic banking thing, I'd love to know more about how that works. But I know it's. The debt as leverage isn't very common, but I take it there's a little bit of that there. So I'd love to know more. So please make another comment about that. And thanks for the question.
Yeah, I'd like to share I have a trivia question for
let's get that on
your viewers.
Yeah.
So I want you.
We got to do that sooner in the show, but here it is, folks, coming up right here. Look at the screen. Is this it?
Slide number 12. Yes. In which country, despite its free market image, is all the land owned by the state, and 85% of housing is provided by a government-owned housing corporation? So
Okay, folks.
Not the United States, obviously.
Yeah. Trivia question. Come on.
Yeah.
Comment below with your answer. Okay. Are we seeing any answers come in yet, Ashley?
Yeah, not yet.
Not yet. Okay. All right. So trivia questions on the board. Let's get an answer to that, and we'll give you a big shout out. Oh, we got one answer here. I don't think that's the right answer. Oh, we got a whole bunch of answers coming in. Thanks, folks. Keep those answers coming. Your answer to the trivia question: in which country, despite its free market image, is the land owned by the government? And 85% of housing is provided by this government-owned housing corporation. I don't think I see a right answer here yet. These are good answers.
Yeah, these are good answers. Yeah,
these are good answers, and I can see why people would think those answers would be applicable. I can see them for all of the varying answers. But come on, folks, keep them coming. Keep those answers coming here. And by the way, I love some of your handles like Cool Name and Artwork Magic.
And Rent is Due.
Coastal Living. Yeah, Rent Due. We had that one earlier. Yeah. Good stuff. Okay, we'll keep those coming here. Ashley, did you have any more slides you want to share?
I do. I have an interesting, go down to slide number 15 on this day in history.
Oh yeah, this is a good one too. Here's another question for you. We're going to double up on the questions here because this one's pretty good. Yeah. Well, I guess they don't need the answer to it because you're giving
right. Well, your viewers and listeners are very, very cultured and very well rounded. So on this day in history, July 25th, 1943, Benito Mussolini fell from power.
Yep. That's great. Isn't it great that he fell from power? It's amazing, these dictators and idiots. And what's interesting is under the Obama administration, he had sort of a strange kind of like system that he was trying to implement and sort of did for a while, which was sort of fascist, but also socialist at the same time. And I would argue that we have a pretty fascist system nowadays where we have these big giant companies who are in bed with the government. It's really scary. They think it's like free enterprise, but it's just not at all. I mean, the big tech companies, they're not engaged in capitalism. they're government cronies. Okay, they do so many favors for the government in return for so many other favors. It's just unbelievable. But yeah, I love the This Day in History app on Alexa. Can't say her name, but for obvious reasons.
I want to get your take on something, Jason. Mussolini said, and this was almost a century ago. He said, "Many think, and I myself am one of them, that capitalism is scarcely at the beginning of its story."
Many think that capitalism is scarcely at the beginning, meaning it is
at the beginning of its story. Meaning it has a long way to go, and it's going to be the system of the future.
Mussolini thought that?
Yeah, he said that. Yeah, a century ago. Yeah,
that's quite interesting. I'm surprised that was coming from him. Now, keep in mind, in 1943, I mean, we had Karl Marx catching on like crazy, and now catching on in the U.S. Sadly, it's interesting what was going on in the world back then. We had the Socialist Republic under the Nazis, right? The National Socialist Party there. Hitler offering free healthcare and all kinds of government perks. So it's weird how these things they really do overlap, these different systems. But yeah, I don't know. What were you looking for as my comment on Mussolini's comment? I don't know that I have on that. I mean, just that it's surprising that he would say.
It is surprising, just that, yeah, that he would say that. You wouldn't think that, but he did. We have a correct answer. Rent is.
Okay. Wait, not yet. Let me show some of the other answers first. Okay. Don't show it yet. Okay, so here we got a couple: China, Sweden, Australia. Okay, gosh, quite a few Chinas here. I'm actually quite surprised at that. China's pretty capitalistic in a way, folks. Even though it's communist at the same time, it's oddly capitalistic. So yeah, look at Russia, England. Yeah, okay, Iceland. Yeah, Brazil. That's interesting. China, another China, and that's it, right?
Singapore.
Rent is due. Singapore. Seems like a very libertarian free market image, but when it comes to housing, Singapore largely provides it, Yeah. From power swinging. Oh, that's about Mussolini. Yeah. Good stuff. But what is the real estate slowdown? Okay. So I do have to comment on that. Many times the title of the live stream does not match the discussion, as it did not last week. Because last week I was supposed to talk about unethical agents and property managers. Never even touched on that last week. Sorry, folks. Tangent alert. So the market is cooling off a bit, and we are happy to see it. In a lot of areas, we are seeing things just sort of cool a tad. Again, this is a small metric. It's anecdotal. Mortgage applications, that's not anecdotal. Those are down. So, maybe there is some resistance by buyers to the prices. They've, obviously there's been a big climb in prices, but we are seeing a slowdown. But I want to warn you of a big slowdown that is coming. It is a huge slowdown. I'm going to do a video on this and a podcast on it too. And that is a ways away, but this could lead to an actual market collapse, a hugely significant change in the real estate market coming your way. So get ready for it. And that is the population time bomb, meaning the population is declining like crazy. Just look at the projections out into the future in the US and around the world. People are just not having kids. There's hardly any population growth. Fertility rates are way below replacement rates. In westernized countries, depending on which one you're talking about, there may be around 1.3, when just replacement, not growth in population, is 2.1, meaning every woman has to have 2.1 kids. They don't all live, right? They don't all make it to adulthood to procreate themselves. So the population time bomb that is coming could be a hugely significant change in the real estate market. Fortunately, you've got a few decades before you need to worry about it. So for the next few decades, real estate is going to do pretty well.
I see a lot of questions from your viewers about Florida in particular. I think a lot of people are interested in investing in Florida. Matthew Hirayama says, "What's up, Jason? What's good, Jason? Do you forecast real estate in Orlando to be a stable long-term investment?"
Yeah, I do. I think Florida is really the best state right now overall, but there are other good ones. I mean, there are good opportunities. I mean, Memphis, Tennessee has been a perennial favorite for investors. Indianapolis, Little Rock, Alabama is booming now. I mean, we are just, Alabama, interestingly, has become a very business-friendly state. They've got their act together with some of their, more recent changes. Alabama, really, really good. We're doing tons of business in Alabama. North Carolina is pretty good too. But Florida sort of gets all the attention at the moment, largely because of the Northeasterners and the great governor we've got here. And I think Florida really benefited during the lockdowns because it wasn't so strict. People were still holding events here, like our event coming up in September. Go to empoweredinvestor.com and register for that and join us live in person, folks, right there, empoweredinvestor.com. So Florida is kind of like the poster child, if you will, right now, but there are many good markets. So just reach out to us. But yeah, Florida is definitely one of the very good places.
Mm-hmm. And a nice place to live, as you know.
Yeah. Ashley, you said something to me interesting the other day about Florida. You said it was kind of the ideal state, right?
I think so. I really do think so. It has everything. It has a bit of everything.
Yeah. Hey, I want to address, we had a question or a comment from Sammy earlier, but to follow up on the house hacking, I want to just put this up here for a minute. House hacking a duplex and getting a owner-occupied loan, basically with 3% down, plus being a realtor getting paid 3% commission back. Yeah, that is a great deal, Sammy. I agree. You live in one side of the duplex and you get an owner-occupied loan. That's not a bad deal. No question about it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But it's better if the whole duplex was a rental, because then you would be getting income from both units rather than a liability of paying for one because you're occupying it. But if you're not living at home and you need a place to live anyway, I don't love the idea of living next to my tenants for sure, but it's not bad for a young person who's like doing their first deal. That's okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Ashley, let's wrap it up soon. You got anything else? Maybe, whatever else you want to kind of start winding it down?
Yeah, I just want to thank everyone for these great questions, and we'll get to some of these next week as well. Yep. And thanks for joining us this morning.
Yep, and we get them on the podcast as well. Maybe you want to just grab this one, not that one. No. Oh, watching from Romania. I love it. You're in Romania. I remember I was in Bucharest, Romania once, and it was so hot. I think I got heat stroke being a tourist there. It was one of those days when it was just so hot because all of the concrete just retains the heat in that city and any city. And this is why a lot of these global warming statistics are bogus, highly manipulated, because, if you put the thermometer in the middle of a concrete jungle, it's going to read higher than it did 100 years ago when there wasn't a concrete jungle there. Okay. So, folks, there's a lot to that. Okay. But anyway, okay. What's your question from Romania? Let's see here.
What would you say about the real estate here, considering debt to GDP is under 60%?
Yeah, which should not be considered low, but now comparatively it is, right? Yeah, interesting. I went to Romania and looked at real estate there, and also on that same trip looked at Bulgarian real estate, and a couple others, but those were the two I was focused on because both of them, I think Romania was one of them, just joined the EU at the time, and I know Bulgaria did, and I don't know. I went on like 5 countries on that tour. I can't remember which ones. But it could be good. I don't know enough about it. Bulgaria seemed pretty attractive at that time. But again, the US has a very special real estate market because it has those wonderful long mortgages. It has data transparency. There's no Zillow in Romania or anywhere else for that matter. Most of these countries have no MLS system. They have very opaque systems of data. And it's very hard to know what a property is worth when you don't have a multiple listing service, when you don't have county recorders like you do in the US, with all that comparable data. That's one of the reasons the US is a very special real estate market. Not to mention that it's the world's biggest economy, and you've got these tremendous financing options and good rule of law. So, you would just know way more about that than I do. But the debt to GDP ratio is lower. But then again, Romania doesn't have the reserve currency of the world either. So the answer is I don't know. You just, you have to use your own judgment. But I will say overall, the U.S. has a very special real estate market in all the world. Very special. Okay. There was another question here I wanted to address because it's some of my old hometown here. Mm-hmm. It's this one. Do you like areas like Laguna Niguel, Newport Beach, Orange County, California? Will they see a correction as well? I used to live in these places. I lived in Newport Coast, Newport Beach, Irvine for many, many years. Most of my adult life I spent in Orange County, California. I had a real estate company there that I sold to Coldwell Banker. I know all about those markets. Those are high-flying, cyclical markets. And what goes up must come down. The high-flying markets look like a roller coaster when you're looking at a chart. They never have good cash flow because they're too expensive to make sense for investment. They are speculation markets. Now, I don't mean to say that you can't make money speculating, because you certainly can. I've made a lot of money speculating. But again, you have to be on the right side of the trade, and you don't know if that market will continue to go up and experience what's called the greater fool theory, meaning no matter what I paid for this property, some greater fool will come along and pay more, right? That's what you're relying on in Orange County. But in linear markets, by contrast, the markets we recommend, the markets you'll find at jasonhartman.com, and you'll hear about and you'll meet our teams at Empowered Investor Live in September in Orlando. Join us for that. Get your tickets at empoweredinvestor.com right there. In those markets, those are markets that will give you good positive cash flow and good, reliable, long-term linear appreciation rates where you are not a speculator. So definitely check those out. Go to empoweredinvestor.com and join us. You can also go to jasonhartman.com and find properties there right now. And be sure you fill out one of the forms on that website so one of our investment counselors can contact you, because a lot of properties just aren't on the market yet. Okay. So keep that in mind. Okay, Ashley, let's really wrap it up this time. How's that?
All right. That's great. Jason Hartman for president, ladies and gentlemen.
Not going to happen.
What is your campaign slogan?
Yeah, exactly. Not going to happen. Was not born in the United States, okay. So I guess I can't run, can I?
Too bad. All right. Thank you so much for joining us, everyone, and please subscribe, hit the like button, and thanks for all your great questions.
Yeah, really great questions today. And
yeah.
I'm looking at the stats, Ashley, of people coming and going. Not listening, then listening again, and they're like even. Everybody's stuck with us for an hour and a half today. So thank you for sticking with us. I think we were probably somewhat interesting because you stuck with us, and we appreciate that. And be sure to subscribe to the podcast, the YouTube channel, turn on the notification bell, and thank you for hitting the like button as well. We really appreciate that. And we will be back tomorrow with another podcast. The Creating Wealth Show is 3 times a week, every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And then we live stream every week. So Ashley will be back next week for that. And just want to say happy investing to everyone. And thanks for listening today. Bye, everybody. Thank
Bye.
you.